Antoine Fuqua's latest offering, the much awaited and long anticipated biopic on the life and times of the King of Pop, has arrived. And so naturally, I have some thoughts. So, today's motion picture discussion. Michael, let's talk about it. If you've been keeping up with any of the videos on this channel at all, you likely know I am a fan of Michael Jackson. I have been since I was a child, and probably surprisingly, I may be in the minority on this, but I was one of those fans that was not really looking forward to this movie. Not that I was dreading it. I just kind of didn't have any feelings on it either way about being excited to see it. I wasn't excited to see it like I would be another project. It just kind of was something that was coming, and I didn't really have any feelings either way. In fact, I was a little bit cautious when the first trailers dropped, because when I watched them, I did see something that, kind of started talking to the parts of myself that was excited about Michael Jackson stuff. The kind of feelings that I get when I watch a Michael Jackson clip on social media, or listen to some of his music, or go back to my favorite Michael Jackson short films. It spoke to that piece in me, and yet still I was cautious. It wasn't something that I felt like I needed as a fan. Anyone who's a fan, or even who's not a fan, if you know anything about Michael Jackson, you know there's plenty of media about him, his work ethic, his life, and a lot of, almost every area of his life has been dissected and scrutinized and studied for decades now. And another Michael Jackson project wasn't going to move the needle to make someone excited about a new something. So that was my feeling. I felt like I'm kind of okay. There's plenty I can always revisit stuff that I love about his work and sort of get my fix from that. Then of course there's the Jacksons and American Dream, the miniseries that dropped in the early 90s as a part of a lot of people's DNA. If you're a kid of a certain age and you watched that miniseries, or you caught it later, there's enough going on in that. That's really that's a pretty juicy project that covers lays the groundwork and covers the sort of origin story of Michael Jackson. So, and then of course there's plenty of other movies and dramatizations about Michael Jackson, about areas of his life. There's plenty of stuff out there. I don't know if you need anything else. You don't need this, this film. Having said that, I began to look forward to seeing this movie again. But that's later. It was much later. That feeling came pretty much in the last couple months. Like, okay, I'm looking forward to it. And I was going with people who I had special memories directly linked to Michael Jackson with. So that actually added to it for me. Now that I've seen it, I saw it actually day before official opening. Day before it had opened. I sat with it, took some time to collect my thoughts. Overall, I had a good time with this movie. And I think most fans will have a good time with this movie, because it in some respects, it feels less like a movie and more like it's an excuse for a celebration, which is not necessarily bad. Certainly, if you're a fan, it's not a bad thing. You're going to have a good time. Having said that, I think looking at this film as a film and being realistic about it, like I think I can look at it and remove the rose-colored glasses and be able to look. What do we have? What are we actually looking at here as a project? And I think that as a biopic, meaning as a project that follows the tropes of what we understand to be biopics, the film does leave a lot to be desired. If you're looking for complexities about, if you're looking for something that is like a character study, where we get to see all the different shades and the complexities of a human, the film doesn't really give us that in the ways that we might expect it from like we see in other biopics. You may be wanting that, and I think it's fair to say, as a biopic, the movie does not do that. So it fails in that area. But what it does do is that it does give us a straight story about a man who is fighting demons, who does have a conflict, which is what we need for any of our stories. We want to be following someone who is struggling with something, and we want to see how they're going to overcome it. Will they overcome it? What happens to them? And I think the movie does give us that. You can make a case that this movie functions like a theme park ride in the ways that theme park rides have thin plots. So if you look at something like Captain EO, for instance, the Captain EO short film, it's a very simple story. It's very short. It's quick. It's an excuse for like conflict that's resolved with the synchronized dance and magic bursts and blasts and stuff like that, and then and then it ends happily. If you take the formula for something like that, I think this movie functions like that. But this is not to say that it's without depth. I think this is where the movie differs than most theme park rides. They're not going to give you any like meat. However light or simple a story is, there's plenty of meat on the bones of this project. Essentially, this is a father and son story, right? It's about the conflict between fathers and sons, and how a son is struggling to find his independence, and then also struggling with his loyalty to his family, and also his loyalty to himself and his dreams and what he's after, and having that not be respected and not be, there's a constant sort of clash and push and pull. This is a theme you see when you think of something like Frankenstein, for instance, and how the father is domineering and has a very strong will, and the child is trying to assert themselves and trying to show that they're their own person. They're trying to be their own man, and that's constantly at odds. And I think for me, that was an effective thread, I think, to focus on, given the fact that the filmmakers had to make changes to the story with all the lawsuit stuff, and they had to sort of find other ways to tell the story that could be still meaningful. I think there are worse ways to go. This was probably the only way they could have gone to make the story still feel effective. Because, and it's not like this is false. This is a true thing. We understand that that Joe Jackson was tough. He demanded perfection. He demanded a lot of his kids, and because Michael ended up being the captain of that group, he was the captain of the team. A lot was thrust upon him at a young age, and that never really stopped. And he demanded a lot of himself too. Like, this is something that is well documented and well known. And I think having the heart of the conflict focus on Joe pushing Michael is very effective. And I think for certain audiences who've grown up with tough parents and recognize their existence, their story is sort of on screen. Just, it might look a little bit different, but the flavor of that is the same. I recognized a lot of that. A lot of the struggles that Michael was having with his dad. It's a very real thing for some of us. So to me, that was fine. You have that heart conflict. And then also there's a sub-conflict with Michael internally. Michael is struggling. He's got all these ideas inside him. He's got all these things he wants to express. And there's a larger sort of barrier with wanting to break free. And then what happens to his family when he does that? Ultimately, we know how it ends. But those are resonant conflicts, I think, for me. I think that actually, that's what this movie gives us. Then, of course, I think the other half of this movie is just like the celebration of Michael's music and his work ethic, his person, the childlike wonder, and his deep sensitivity, the light that he wanted to bring, the light he strove for that. You see it portrayed fairly well, actually very well. Everyone is talking about this. I'm not going to add anything new to the conversation that you haven't already heard. Jafaar Jackson is revelatory. He plays Michael Jackson with a truth that is, if you close your eyes and listen to him talk, just in the speaking scenes, he sounds like Michael Jackson, which is not, if it's not a surprise if you've heard him before. I can remember years ago hearing him on a Christmas special with Jermaine and his brother, I think Your Majesty. They were doing a Christmas performance show, and there were sections where they were talking. If you close your eyes and listen to Jafaar, listen to him talk and sing, his singing voice sounded a lot like Michael at a particular age. I mean, the era of Michael, so Off the Wall era, early Thriller, Jafar sounded like that. And so even back then, that was probably about 2017-ish to 2018. I'd seen that. Even back then, there was talk that if there ever was a movie, that Jafaar Jackson should play Michael Jackson. And look, this is there's been plenty of people who've played Michael Jackson in other projects to varying degrees of success. Some people are better than others. And even the musical, if you've seen the musical, there are several of those guys who've been cast as Michael Jackson who can convincingly play Michael Jackson to a certain extent that feel like they capture the essence of Michael Jackson. But Jafaar Jackson is the first person I've seen to portray Michael in a way that it's the most Michael than whatever you think out there. If there was anything beyond the essence to capture, Jafar did that. I think I would say he did that. Like, that's the most Michael Jackson performance that there is. And this is just out because people obviously expect the dance moves. That's like a given. Right. And he was very good doing those things, doing the performances too. Excellent even. But it's when he's not dancing. It's the moments of quiet, the intimate moments, the moments where you see him in the studio figuring out a song, or you see him in the dance studio with a bunch of dancers working out dance moves. That is what I'm talking about. It's like the DNA, the nucleus of whatever Michael Jackson is as an entity. Jafaar Jackson captured that. If you've seen the This Is It documentary movie, or you've seen any behind the scenes stuff of Michael Jackson talking about his process, any interviews, whatever it is, it's the relaxed, it's when he's not performing on stage that you manage to get that. You get the behind the cameras, the off stage stuff. I would be really surprised if there's no conversation mentioning him about any kind of nomination for anything. I'm not talking about, it doesn't necessarily have to be the Academy Awards. I'm talking about anything. Jafaar Jackson should be nominated for something. That's how well he portrayed his uncle. Obviously, he gets top marks. I think second, the next person to mention is Coleman Domingo. He's a fantastic actor. He portrays Joseph Jackson in a way that's menacing and imposing and unsettling, and taps into whatever you imagine obviously this is a dramatization, whatever it is, so none of us were there. We don't know what the juice is, but we can know what the juice is. If you've seen any interviews with Joe Jackson and you've heard Michael talk about his experiences growing up, I think it's a fairly accurate representation of how he was described by people who knew him. It's quite effective. There were even times where, I don't know if this was intentional, but sometimes he would show up on screen and it would just be funny. I would just be laughing like, oh man, this guy, at the same time feeling uncomfortable when he was on screen. And I think that taps into something primal for any kid who's had a tough parent, and particularly tough dads. And if you've had any level of fear toward that parent, it's something that's quite primal, and definitely hit me. Coleman Domingo was very effective. The one thing I will say that I questioned about this movie that I think the miniseries does, which this film does not do, is that it humanizes Joe Jackson. Yes, he was complicated. Yes, he was very hard. He was domineering. He pushed a lot, and he wasn't always nice. But the miniseries showed someone who was still a dad. And I think if you know anything about Joe Jackson, and you've seen him talk about what it was like to raise the Jackson brothers, and even around the time Michael Jackson passed away, there was you could feel there's some like regret, there's some grief as to how he handled things, and there's still love there, like there's still care for his son. He still lost his son, and this movie doesn't really give us a shade of Joe that's human. He just feels very just like he's the definitive antagonist of this entire movie. Outside of that, he's like the antagonist A, and then antagonist B is sort of internal stuff that Michael's going through, trying to figure out his process and who he's going to be, who he wants to be. There's internal strife going on there, and so that is one thing I noticed. Like, oh man, yeah, Joe was tough, but he was still a human. He was still a dad. And, I think a lot of people want to hate Joe Jackson, which is, I'm not saying it's not valid, but he is, he was a human. He was complicated, made lots of mistakes. And there was something that I just noticed, that there wasn't really a human in Joe there. Like, not as much. He was kind of like, which is, take that for what it is. Nia Long was very good as Catherine Jackson. On the flip side, something else I noticed, that I don't know that I was a fan of how she was written in this movie. She was written as someone who was quietly strong, which I'm sure Catherine Jackson in real life was that a lot of times. But I'm also sure that she stood up to Joe a lot more often than we see in the movie. And the miniseries at least gives us that. She gives us the miniseries gives us, in Angela Bassett's portrayal, a woman who was devoted to her family, and obviously, she let a lot of things slide. A lot of Joe's behavior, she let a lot of stuff go. But there are pockets where she didn't, and she was very vocal about that. And in this movie, Nia Long, as great as she was, her performance was fantastic, actually. And I actually particularly appreciated the moments we see between her and Jafaar Jackson's Michael. That is something that, because it's no secret that Michael was closer to his mother than he was Joseph, that there was a real, and vice versa. You see that, how much love that was there in interviews. It's well documented. This movie does a good job portraying their relationship and the love and warmth between them. It's very sweet, very loving and wholesome to see. And Nia Long plays her role in that dynamic very well. Special mention has to go to Mike Myers, who was a surprise busting up in this movie. And I love that he was not featured in trailers and he wasn't mentioned, as plays Walter Yanikoff. Everybody knows the CBS executive who was instrumental in making sure that Michael Jackson's videos were played on MTV during the Thriller era. For a minute, you don't recognize him. He portrays Yanikoff very richly and authentically. He feels very much like a character. I'm not quite sure how much of how Myers portrayed him was like for real. If you've seen any interviews with Walter Yanikoff, you know a little bit about him. But just as an aside, I wonder if this is now going to be something that is Graham King, as a producer on this project. He was also responsible for Bohemian Rhapsody. Mike Myers also shows up in that movie, I think, as another executive or some kind of person who's similar to Walter Yanikoff. And I wonder if Mike Myers is going to pop up in whatever the next biopic is, which might be I think Graham King is responsible for the Beatles movie too. And so I'm kind of hoping that Mike Myers will pop up in that movie too. In any event, it was good to see him, and he's solid in this movie for the short part he's in. The other thing that must be discussed, it would be a travesty if I didn't discuss this aspect of the movie, and that is the musical numbers all throughout the movie, but particularly midway point to the second half of the movie, which is obviously when Michael becomes full solo, and just the attention to detail actually throughout the movie, from the ABC video they were doing to the stage performances, to the early parts of Michael's young solo era. So the early 70s, Michael was young teen. The attention to detail is impeccable, and you really see it when you get to From Off the Wall onward. And if you're a fan, you've seen these performances millions of times. You've seen all the videos, you've seen the stage performances, you've seen all the tour footage, how perfect they got. It's almost like you're seeing this on screen, right, in the movie, but you're also, it's weird because there's like this weird separation between, like, your eyes, both of your eyes are seeing both versions overlaid on top of each other. So for instance, the sequence when they're showing the Beat It video, or the Billie Jean Motown performance, or the Thriller video, you're seeing what that you've seen a million times, but it's also transposed with this current stuff that we're seeing on the big screen. Antoine Fuqua brought his music video directorial skills to bear in all these sequences. They feel like you didn't just recreate them, you recreated them. You tapped into the energy and the time period, and as well as the sets, how they built the sets, the material possibly they used, and how you recreated all the costumes, how how you recreated even the lighting and the color grading for each of those. If they don't get acknowledged, that's a travesty, because the production design and the cinematography of it was just very well done, very impeccable. It's a lot like the Live Aid sequence from the Bohemian Rhapsody movie. That was amazing. You could watch that on YouTube, and it's almost nearly one-to-one recreation, and it's just perfect. This movie does the same thing with a lot of the Michael Jackson music video stuff and live performances. Fantastic. I think Antoine Fuqua's direction is very sound. It's very steady. It's consistent. Definitely worth a look. My biggest issues with the movie, I mentioned a few things that were kind of like, oh, I had feelings about how Joe Jackson wasn't humanized. I had feelings about how Katherine Jackson she was very not vocal enough an opponent to Joe's anger and his frustration, stuff like that. I did like how it was acknowledged that she felt like she didn't do enough as a parent, which I think if you're a kid in that dynamic, at some point you're going to feel like one parent didn't do enough to protect you from the other parent. So I appreciated that was mentioned because, again, as someone who's felt that dynamic, I did like that. My other issue is that, come on, look, how are you going to make a movie about Michael Jackson's life and not include anything about his star turn as the Scarecrow in the Quincy Jones produced the Wiz movie? That just seemed like a huge miss. I mean, whatever. There are probably other issues for why they couldn't do that, but it feels like you got to mention that. I don't even think the miniseries did that. I don't remember it doing that. And probably for similar reasons. There's probably some legal stuff in the mix as to why they couldn't do that. But come on, if this is a biopic, you got to at least show a scene or something of him in the Scarecrow makeup or something. So that was a problem. I had an issue with that. Oh, the other thing is bubbles. I was not a fan of computer-generated bubbles. I don't know what the conversations were around not using an actual monkey, but I almost feel like you could have used a trained monkey for some of the sections there, and it would have been much more effective, just visually, than whatever they did. I mean, it was cute. But just if I'm being sort of more critical, was not a fan of bubbles. I was surprised that they touched on Michael Jackson's vitiligo, and there was more conversation about the plastic surgery, like the nose work. There was like actual time devoted to those things. So that was nice. I appreciated that. I was surprised, didn't expect that at all. It was nice to have that there. That gave us insight into the psyche a little bit of Michael and how he was thinking about stuff and what led to certain decisions. So I appreciated that. Yeah, other than that, I don't have any other real complaints. I think for the most part, again, this movie is worth a look. And I say that also understanding that this is not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and that's fine. This is what's fun about talking about movies. So overall, I did enjoy it. I don't think it was perfect. I do think it has some things that could have been improved. And perhaps some of that stuff will be addressed in the follow-up movie that looks like they're going to do. But as a single situation and as a celebration of Michael Jackson's life and work, this is suitable. I think this will do for a lot of fans. The more I think about it, my favorite thing about the film, outside of Jafaar Jackson's performance and everything else, it's really about like I like how I can see there's a clear narrative being told about, and this has nothing to do with Michael Jackson's the myth of Michael Jackson and the magic and like the grandioseness of Michael Jackson as a character, as a persona. What I most connect with is the through line of the fathers and sons story. It's really about a kid who is very talented, who comes up against opposition in the form of his father. And he's having to try to work to overcome that and also overcome whatever self-doubt he might have to will himself beyond the challenge of his father and to step more into what he believes his destiny to be. And I think every child in some respect has that challenge. And particularly when you have a tough childhood with your parents, if you have a strained relationship with the parent or a challenging dynamic with the parent, I think that conflict, it's something about it feels, it's very archetypal, it's very it's dramatic. It's like Greek tragedy type of stuff. It's like Shakespearean. This is Star Wars. This is Luke and Darth Vader. That's what in this movie I can see that thread is what comes up for me. That's the strongest bond for me. Outside of my, I'm a fan, right? I love Michael Jackson, but outside of all that, what really is hitting me, and I think this is what stuck with me after I left the movie. I've been thinking a lot about my dad, and so after having seen that movie, I'm having dreams about conversations with my dad. So it's much more personal in that way for me. So that's my biggest takeaway from this movie is the father-son dynamic. And I think it was a smart move. However, filmmakers came to it. It was a smart move to have that be the sole conflict, really, of this movie. The movie's out now. If you're curious about checking it out, go see it. If not, don't see it. But those are my thoughts on Antoine Fuqua's Michael, and that's going to do it. So I'm getting out of here. Stay tuned. More reviews on the way. In the meantime, take it easy, take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.